delight to me to be here in front of you and to speak to you about the Torah, the scriptures, and the revelation of God. This parasha that we're going to see this week, Balak, is a parasha that comes by himself, if we can say it in this way. Even among our sages and our rabbis, there is always a kind of arguments, if we can call it in that way, that who really wrote this part, when was written, and is part of the Torah, is not part of the Torah. This parasha has something peculiar. In this parasha there is not any law or prescription or guidance from God that is put in the 613 principles of law of the scripture that Judaism has in their studies. There is no part of the Teriag, the 613. Then we ask ourselves sometimes who really wrote this, because in this portion you're going to see that basically it's talking about somebody totally outside Israel, and all this thing that is happening is not happening in Israel and not happening in the camp. It's only at the end when we are going to get in the transition in which Israel falls in sin, and then the next week we are going to see another personality, you know, Pinchas, whatever you want to be pronounced, and a very special, the grandson of Aaron, and we are going to see that he's a very special man. His name himself has a lot to say, you know, the mouth of the serpent. You know, when you call somebody like that, then you need to be careful. And he's going to be Hagadol Kohen too. But let's go back again to Balak. Also, our rabbis and sages tell us why a parasha has the name of somebody who even is not a Jew, is not an Israelite. No, Balak is the king of the acting king of Moab. And I mentioned the term acting king of Moab because even there is a discussion if he was really a Moabite or he was a Midianite, acting as the interim king of Moab. Whatever the discussion it is, listen to the moral or the meanings of the names. Balak, it has to do with waste. And they give it the idea of destroyer, destruction, totally desolate. You know, it's not a very nice name to put also to a king. Now, and here we are going to have something very special in this portion. Is the coming of a Gentile, a Goyim prophet. And this is a typical prophet for profit. Okay? This is somebody who is going to speak according to how much you pay me. You know, and I want to tell you what you want to hear according to how much I want to receive. In this parasha, in the introduction, you're going to see that basically this man was a kosem. That means there was like a witchcraft, a witch doctor, something like that. You know, in Yehoshua, you want to see that also he's mentioned in that terms. It's in the Talmud that they call it a real prophet of the Gentiles. There is a tradition that say that in order that all the nations of the world wouldn't complain about Israel, that was the only nation that has prophets, our God Almighty, blessed be His name, allowed all the nations to have a prophet, and this prophet was Bilam, or Baalam. Also the term Bilam, that is the pronunciation in Hebrew, and has come to us as Baalam, the transliteration. The name, the etymology of this name is also a little bit difficult sometimes from certain Hebrews, but there are two major lines of understanding. The first one is the believe or believe ama, but come from the word that says without people, without nation. Okay, that means that what the idea that brings to us is that he doesn't care for whom he is hired, and he doesn't care who he is going to destroy or who is going to bless. It's only how much you pay me. Okay, that's very interesting. And that will bring to you a lot of ideas on the modern times about so many of those people that are there in TV right now. You know that they promise you a lot of blessing if you send them some kind of money or some kind of, they make some kind of transfers. You know, that's it. The other side also, the other translation of the etymology will be when this is Balam, you know, from the word Baal, Amba. That means a master or sir or something like that of my people, you know, the people. That means that he is has crowned himself as the leader of the rest of the people of the Gentiles. There is a very interesting, there are a lot of interesting traditional stories about these characters, but especially they say that, for example, that God has 70 nations all over the world. You know, 70 means the rest of the world, and Israel was set apart and was not part of the 70 nations. For that reason, Israel fulfilled a very important role. This is what created a sense of envy, and still today we are suffering this problem. It's only to give you certain notes before I go to the message. God said to Balaam, do not go with them, and you will not curse these people, for these are blessed people. Now, do not go with the people who hate Israel, and do not curse these people, Israel, because they are blessed. Already God is setting a parameter to Balaam that he cannot do anything against Israel. Why? Because they are blessed. Now we need to understand the idea of the bracha, the blessing. Because a blessing is the opposite of a hilul. That means a curse. No? The blessing basically brings the idea of covering and protecting. Okay? When you are blessed by God, what it means basically is you are protected by God. Okay? When you are cursed, basically means that you are going to suffer, you are going to be destroyed. Okay? That's the idea. Then you have two sides about the blessing and the curse. Then, if God has blessed something, nobody can touch the thing, the people, or whatever God has blessed, only if God, blessed be His name, allow that to happen. Listen carefully, it's very careful. Okay, to understand. When God blesses something, only God can decide is that people who, that situation, whatever it is, can be touched or not, can be changed or not. Not any other human being, anything on the earth can return. Not even Hasatan. And we can see in this, for example, in the situation of Job, the book of Job. And I always have said that the book of Job represents the suffering Messiah. in case that some certain people, to me, has a messianic undertones about the suffering Messiah. And it's not interesting that how Satan comes and needs to ask permission, literally permission to God to do something to Job. And he said, he gives a permission that is limited. You know, he said, you can do anything to him, but you cannot take his life. That to show you, God can allow certain things to happen for a reason. And sometimes we do not convey all the understanding that God is trying to give us through all of this, but we are little by little getting there. Then, saying that, basically what you have with Balak is that Balak is going to try by any means to do what he wants to do. And what he wants to do? To make money. Okay? It's interesting that he doesn't know who are these people, who he's going to supposedly, the king of Balak. What did he say here? We know, okay, that whoever you bless will be blessed, and whoever you curse will be cursed. We know that. You know, just recently, I say recently in comparison to the time, in 1967, in the other side of the Jordan River, in the Jordanian territory, in some of the ruins they had found a stela with scriptures about Balaam, the prophet. And what it says doesn't mention the God of Israel, but what it mentions is that they built this stela for him because it was a thanksgiving that he interceded to the gods of the Canaanites in order to stop a plague that they were suffering. In other words, he was very well known, what I call it an itinerant prophet. You know, was going from town to town making money. You know, there's nothing new today. Many people think that they just invented the wheel. The wheel has been invented a long time ago. There's nothing new. You know, he had powers, and he could do certain things. Always the question is, if he was a real prophet from God, or he was an enemy of God. And you know, and we are going to argue this until Mashiach comes back, and maybe he is going to remind us a lot of things and reveal a lot of things that we need to know. But one thing is basically a fact that we need to understand. That there are people that have certain powers. They can do good or evil. And this a particular personality decided to use it for personal benefits. Now, when you have a person who is very gifted, okay, and he knows that he's very, very gifted, and use everything for his own or her own gain, you are going to understand that that person is very selfish in looking at himself or herself. Then we need to look at these people in this way. That even that they are very gifted, instead to use that giftedness for the welfare and the goodwill of everybody, you know, they use it only for themselves. Then, beginning from there, let me continue, and I'm going to make here a pause, and I'm going to change to something different. I am a student of political science, and has been studying political science for almost all my life, since I was very young, and have been involved in many things political, until I became a believer in Messiah YASHUV, and after that I left all those things, even that I have been always interested in politics, you know. You have heard me many times saying to you that the difference between a prophet and a political person is the prophet is forced to say and to act according to what God reveals to them. False prophets, of course, exist. And a politician, to me, is like a false prophet. What they're going to tell you is what they want to hear when you want to hear, okay? And because they're only interested in your vote. And once they get your vote, that is up to them because they inherited the power, and when they have the power, they do whatever they want to do. You know? I say, beware with those ones that they promise you the heavens and the earth. They promise the gold and the silver of all this world and in your hands. And then suddenly they become elected, and they say, what is that? And they say, do you believe me? You know, or they start blaming the enemies, that they don't allow them to do what they need to do. How many countries, how many places you have these people that supposedly they think they are very charismatic, and they're charismatic with weapons, they're charismatic by force, they're charismatic by any way, and then they offer, usually where they are demagogues. What it means, a demagogue, that is a Greek word that means that it's a people who speak for the, it's a person who speaks for the ears of the people. And usually with the people that they speak, the lowest class, those who they don't have any understanding, and those ones that are expecting the crumbs of the world, you know, and you give them a little bit of crumbs, and they accept it. Because, oh, they give me a little house, or they promise a little place, or he promised more food, or he promised that he's going to lower the gasoline for me, you know, or I'm going to have free health insurance and things like that. All those things, then they love it, because the promise is very easy to promise. The problem is how I'm going to deliver that, you know. Politicians are very good, and then when the promises don't become a reality, what they say, my enemies do not allow me to do what I need to do. That's always, all politicians. Okay, here you are going to see that also this principle from the Torah about the YASHUV, that any true person needs to come to their own understanding and need to be responsible for their own acts, need to recognize, acknowledge the wrongdoings, and then to make it right, then to approach God. That's the process. But what happens with people that constantly denying the truth, denying the facts, and trying to always pass the fault on somebody else? You know, we have in the Torah all extracts of teachings about that, beginning with the first man, beginning with the first woman, with the second, the children, you know, and we can continue. With the man, the woman made me do it. The woman, the snake that you made me do it. Cain, am I my brother's keeper? You know, and we continue, and everybody else is constantly this idea. I'm going to blame somebody else for my own acts. And only until I acknowledge what I have done, and I recognize what I have done, and then I confess and make it right, then no, is when I can approach our living God. Blessed is His name. And He always furnishes us that opportunity. Then, saying that, there is a verse of all this, and this, by the way, did you hear this morning when we, in our service, when we say, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, and we continue, this is part of the Balak prophecy. And we have it here. That to tell you that when God makes you speak, when God makes you speak, and you're speaking in the name of God, God always going to make you speak the truth. The problem is when you say that you're speaking in the name of God without God being in you, or God not giving you the utterance to speak. Okay? There are a lot of false prophets. You know, in the time of Jeremiah, Hanavi, the prophet Jeremiah, you know, the crying prophet. You know what happened? The king wanted the prophet say something good. And Jeremiah told him the truth. And because he told the truth, he was punished. But the king loved to hear the lies of the other prophets. At the end, the consequences happened. And this king was dethroned and all those things that happened. And Israel needed to be dispossessed of the land, and we sent it to Babylon. Now, we have here a very interesting situation. The first prophet that we have here, that supposedly is a Gentile, after Israel became a peoplehood. No, because many people, Noah was a prophet, and then they call all the before Abraham personality were also prophet. But here specifically is after Israel was formed. And he has a very difficult situation to face. He never had this situation before. That he needed to curse a nation that he didn't even know. Interestingly enough, that nation that he was going to curse, if we call it racially speaking of blood, they were blood related, because Balak and Abraham, they came from the same area. They were Arameans. Then maybe there was a blood relationship or something. No? We do not know, but that's the possibility. Then we are here to confront something that needs to be looked upon today and what is happening. In chapter 23, verse 9, he says something like this. Verse 8 says, how I can curse? Because let me give you a little bit of background in order to get here, okay? Verse 23 says, Balak said to Balak, build me for me here 7 altars, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. Balak did as Balaam had spoken. And Balak and Balaam brought up a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, stand by your burnt offering while I go. Perhaps, maybe, the Lord will happen toward me and show me something that I can tell you. He went along. God happened upon Balaam, and he said to him, I have prepared the 7 altars, brought up a bull and a ram on each altar. The Lord put an utterance in Balaam's mouth and said, that what in this case Balaam was going to say is what God told him to say. This is important. Go back to Balak, and thus shall you say. He returned to him, and behold, he was standing by his burnt offering, he and all the officers of Moab. This is Balak. And he declaimed his parable and said, from Aramean, Balak, king of Moab, led me from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me. Come, bring anger upon Israel. Now, finally, Balak is acknowledging who is the people that he is going to be cursing. For until that time was a nation, a people. How can I curse? God has no curse. How can I anger? God is not angry. Be careful and be clear. When the Torah speaks, He's giving you certain details that later on is going to happen. How I can curse a people that God has no curse? And how can I anger if God is not angry? Okay? he's already giving you a side step. And from these origins, I see a rock like, and from the hills do I see it. Behold, it is a nation that will dwell in solitude and not be part, or do not be reckoned among other nations. Be apart or be totally alone and won't be considered part of the rest of the nations. I want to use this portion in order to talk about Israel from the moment that was created to until today. Part of the reason that I need to talk about this is because what is happening right now in the world and how the situation that we are living. It is not a surprise to us that we are living right now in a turmoil. And it's a very classic turmoil all over the world. Wherever you look around the world, you're going to see fires. You're going to see explosions. You're going to see wars. You're going to see disagreements among the people, fighting and bickering among each other. And not against nation, but you're going to see the same nation, the same people fighting against themselves. Okay? Now, for example, you can say whatever you want to say, but if you examine in Europe or in the Middle East, and you're going to see that many times the difference is not that there are two different nations, because it's the same people. The only thing is that they have different ways that they grew up, or different in the way that were instructed. And then they are against each other. But at the basic race background is the same. And they are fighting against each other and destroying each other. Only because my side is better than your side. There is no a real reason why to fight. It's only that I am better than you are, or you are better than me, or you have subjugated me all your life, and now it's time for me to not to be subjugated by you. Things like that. Who gave it to you the right to be over me? Things like that. No? Divisions in religion, you will be surprised. You know, when people talk about the Balkan wars, and just recently in the Slavic world, you know, especially in the area of Yugoslavia, you know, you're going to see that the people are the same. Racially speaking, all of them, they are Slavics. But what was the problem? The problem was religion. Some were Christians, the other were Muslims, you know, and they had this thing for thousands of years, or thousand years, brewing, you know, and finally they fought. You go a little bit more to the area, a little higher, to the area of what used to be the former Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union was not a unit, like many people want to think. There were different ethnic groups over there, yes. That also there were different languages and different groups. You know, they were all put together, and they were put under one symbol and under one language. They were forced to talk the same language. That was Russian. Some of the people, they had different language than the Russian. They were upset about that. Why you are going to force me to do this, and why you are going to eliminate who I am. The identity was very important. That was one of the reasons. Another thing was religion. I don't know if you know, but I just recently, I just was listening to the news. I remember that I like to hear the news constantly. The prelate, or the number one from the Orthodox Christian Russian Church, the Pope of Ukraine, if we can call it that way, just died. And he was pro-Russian, of course, because he was for the Russian Church. But what many people do not know is that in Ukraine also they have the Latin Church, the Ukrainian Latin Church, that's pro-Rome, you know, and there is a fight there, power fight. One speaks the Ukrainian, the other speaks the Russian. You know, there is a conflict. To try to understand it sometimes very deep. I am very, very superficial, by the way. I am not trying to tell you all the details, but I am giving you an idea. You have, for example, the problem among the Arabs right now, the Muslims. You know, they're killing among each other. They're the same people sometimes. The only difference, the Persians or the Iranians, they're going to tell you, we are no Arabs. And they're very proud that they are no Arabs. You know, by the way, according to the Torah, they are no Arabs. They are Japhites, like the Europeans. No? And they have a quarrel with the Arabs, but not because they are no Arabs and the other are Arabs. No, it's because pure religion thing. Sunnis against Shias. You know? Then, and in other places, you have what they call it the fight against classes, social classes in countries where, especially in Latin America, because in Latin America, you don't have only one group, you have so many groups that you don't know now who is who and where you come from. You know, there are so many nations, they are all, it's like a melting pot. Okay. There are always, there are going to be disputes and disengagements on problems among nations. And they are going to be produce a lot of criminality and many injustice among themselves and killing among themselves. You have on the other side the Korean, North Korea and South Korea. I can show you, even in the Philippines, you know, you have the Christians and the Muslims. Everywhere you're going to have a lot of problems. The problems in the world, the world is burning. That's what is happening right now. What is very interesting is about this nation who is not counted among the nations. Talking about Israel. Israel is a little bitty country. In the scripture, it's called Am Segula, very special people or singular people. You know, it's a people who was created. This is very important. Was created from the people of the world. Not that I don't want to make it either. The Israel was created from the angels. No. Israel is created from the human beings. It's as human as anybody else. They are not angels. In case that sometimes people very sophisticated, they're trying to put it very high. But this is not the issue. The issue that they were created by God, they were separated by God with one purpose and one purpose alone. To make all the nations to follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true and only God. And there needed to be light to the world. That was the purpose of the creation. That was made, they make a covenant with God Almighty, blessed be His name, and they needed to do that. But we know by revelation, by history, we know that Israel has failed over and over again. And what the teaching here that we can get, the principle that we can get here is, man is not faithful. The one that is faithful is God. We try to make men faithful, but we realize that men always fail, but God is to be God true, man a liar. Basically, that is a simple way to put it. Then, what is happening? Being Israel a different nation to the rest of the world, and because without even they are asking to do that, they were chosen to do that, you know, they are in the centerpiece of the world. It is not something that you need to be surprised that everybody, when I say everybody, I am generalizing, of course, doesn't mean that some of you or other people hate Israel, but everybody in general is jealous of Israel. What is jealous of Israel? Because they were chosen. They don't see that everybody has been chosen. But I talked before about, if you remember when I was talking about Korah, the idea that when God gives you a role, and you desire something different to what God has given to you, you are going to produce problems. Because God gives us roles to fulfill. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's roles to fulfill. For example, if you were born a man, and you want to be a woman, I can assure you that there is something wrong there. Of course, that today that is to go against the wisdom of the world. The wisdom of the world that says that's okay. If you are a man and you want to be a woman, what's wrong with that? You know? If you are a woman and you want to be a man, of course, I will tell you that's wrong. But the world was going to tell you what's wrong with that. If she wants to be a man, who are you to tell her no? It's her own way. You know? Then we are in disadvantage right now. Why? Because we are not any longer believing in roles of what God has given to us, but we believe in the centrality of humanity. And this is what we call humanism. And humanism has conquered the world. We want it or not, human beings have repeated what we call it the Tower of Babylon. Okay? Men has enthroned themselves. And now nobody can defeat men. We are super powerful and we have the destiny in our hands. And they think that they can do whatever they want to do, and even they have the luxury, if I can call it that way, that they can invent their own gods. Okay? And they have been inventing their own gods, they have been inventing their own religions, and they have invented that my God is better than your God, and my God is more powerful than your God, because that was the idea at the time of Balak, the prophet, and Balak. They believed that their gods, their function only in the territory. Only Israel was the one that had they had an itinerant God that was with them, going with them. Then whatever they were, God was their God was with them. You know? Balak recognized the tetragrammaton, Yud, Het, Ba, Het, recognized that Adonai is God. He recognized that. And he said that he followed him. And, he never said he's the only one until he recognized that he is. Now, if he acknowledges that he is, and he knows that he cannot do what he needs to do, means that he in his own way, even he thinks that he can, like every human being who is very smart, they can trick God.
They can
Trick God. Okay? How many of us we have fallen in the trap that we think that we can really deceive God? You know? He won't see it if I do it this way. No? Because we have made God unto likeness and to our own image. Then here comes Israel to play a very important role. Meanwhile, Israel exists. The world needs to quarrel with God himself. Meanwhile, Israel is alive. The rest of the world needs to, by one way or another, understand that they are under a blessing. They are protected. And nobody can destroy Israel. And they have tried by all means and all ways during the history of Israel to destroy these people. Why? Because I am upset that God, blessed his name, chose others and he didn't choose me. But that's not the truth. God is the God of all humanity. And when people start thinking, especially certain religions, start thinking that our God is only for me and not for others, that's when we are wrong. And we need to be careful when you fall in the trap of religious people who say, my God. Hey, wait a minute. You can have your God if you want to have your God, but there is only one God. That's the God of all his creation, because he created all of us. And the scripture says very clear that he doesn't make exception of person. And there's no contradiction with choosing somebody for a special task. Because one thing is to choose you to do a task, another thing to say that you are better than the others. Let's be clear on this. Now, let's go back today. If you are a curious person and you go to the web page of the United Nations and you go to the part about sanctions of the United Nations, and only put 2014, okay, and see the list of the countries that supposedly have been chastised or punished or say something against them for their conduct. You know what is the number one country that has more faults than any country in the world? Israel. Do you know that North Korea is a saint in comparison to Israel? Do you know that Cuba or Venezuela, there are glorified countries that they don't do anything to the people, but they only leave other people to the rest? Do you know that Putin is a saint? This is something that we need to see. The Al-Qaeda, they are not terrorists. The Hamas, they are not terrorists. They are freedom fighters. They are martyrs for the cause. Who are the terrorists? Who are the oppressors? Israel. Now, just recently has happened something that is very sad and has broken my heart to the point that I wrote a letter to the people who are supporters and listeners. And I was mentioning to them the injustice of the world. I put the United Nations, the European countries, including the United States and other countries. I am glad that Canada, until this moment, is totally, in this situation specifically, is totally separated. But one thing that almost all of them have in common. These three young men who were kidnapped and killed in a very ugly way. Okay? They blame them for being there. If they were not there, nothing would happen. It's like, for example, where you are going in over speed, you're running over speed, and somebody crossing the street, and you run over the person. And you blame the person, not you, running over the person, because why the person needed to cross when I was passing through? You know? By the way, not recently here in Canada, we have seen a situation of a young lady that has been condemned for supposedly stopping, and somebody who was coming in their motorcycle was killed, he and his daughter. Okay, it's a tragedy. But be careful, why they don't examine, okay, the woman had probably was wrong, maybe. Okay, did everything wrong. But also we need to look at the other side. What was the speed that the other person was coming? That the person was wearing a helmet, or the person was behind, that was secure? You know, we don't know. Then it's very easy to condemn people for what other people have done. You know, and blame others for my own actions. Well, Israel started immediately after that happened. There were a lot of failures in Israel, by the way, in the police stations and things like that. Israel is dealing with that. Even 4 of the officers have been fired already. But after that, they went house by house. They were looking because they knew that they were cleaning up. Intelligence was telling them very clear that there was an action of extremist terrorists, and they were under the standard of Hamas. Now, in any situation, any police actions, and especially when you put the government, you put the armies, there are going to be casualties. And most of the time, the casualties are innocent people. This is part of the war. Okay. But here, there is no a desire to destroy somebody, only to look for the people. Finally, they found the 3 young men tortured and being killed. They were tortured and being killed. Now, just recently, after they learned that, one young man, an Arab Israeli, and I don't call it Palestinian, Arab Israeli, was found also killed, tortured by someone. Now, Israel, in the open system, allowed that one of there were 3 colonels or doctors that do autopsy, okay? One of them was coming from Ramallah, was a Palestinian doctor, a forensic doctor, okay? Interestingly enough, this is the openness of Israel, allowing somebody, in order to think that we are trying to win. The Palestinian doctor are giving a report that is totally very gruesome. That this young man, the 16-year-old, was killed, was burned alive. That when he was burned, he was still alive. Okay? So like maybe they put some kind of kerosene, gasoline on, you know, and they burn. Okay. And of course, it's playing the ultra-right of Israel. Now, Israel has not finished with the investigation, but they're investigating. And I am pretty sure that they're going to fall the culprits, and they're going to bring it to justice. Because they have done it before. Israel has that particularity. Once some of themselves do something that is against the law in Israel, that person is going to keep, they're going to suffer the consequences. Doesn't matter if he does it as a martyr. Do you remember Baruch Goldstein? Do you remember those? They paid. They were condemned by the Israel courts. I mean, Israel doesn't hide those things. They put it on trial. But at this moment, there are even innuendos and rumors. What is a possibility? That was this child or this young man who was Arab Israeli, was pro-Israel. His own people did that to him in order to blame Israel. Okay? This is the reason that the case has not been closed. Could be true. Could be some Israelis that will become upset and they did. Something that's very unusual, but that can happen. Because here we don't need to try to be holier than thou. We need to look at the situation. But already there are more dead people, there are riots and this thing, and the whole world has blamed Israel for all of this. Even the United Nations, finally, to acknowledge that they were unfair killed these 3 young men. What they say is, well, they didn't deserve that type of death. No? But, you know, they give the understanding that Israel needs to measure the way of responding. There's no right what Israel is doing. Immediately they twist the lines and they are going to blame Israel. What is happening right now? What has made such excerpt so long in order to what I need to tell you? Balak is a picture of the world. That they call themselves that they have the holy turpitude, they are the most fair people in the world, and they judge only the evil ones. And the only evil one here on the world right now is Israel. Is the one that practices apartheid, is the one that practices racism, is the one that practices all these evil things in the world. But nobody says that little bitty Israel, when there is a catastrophe in any part of the world, is the first country that jumps and goes and sends everybody there with his very limited resources. Nobody says that Israel is the country that has found so many developments and help for the world. Nobody talks about Israel, about the openness, about human rights. Nobody talks about that in Israel, even the Arabs who live there have the right to protest against Israel. Even in the Knesset, in the parliament of Israel, there are Arabs. Some of them are totally against the existence of Israel, to the point that right now in Israel they're trying to pass a law that anybody who is a representative in the parliament, they need to swear that they are for Israel, and they say that as a state to survive. But until now, there are members in the Knesset who they want the destruction of Israel. Which other country will allow that? This is why it's so unfair about what is happening in the world. And most of the world keeps the same silence. I sent this letter to many people and only received 3 or 4 responses. Some of them that we are with you, but I need to read more carefully what it really is both sides. Because being a Jew, I am biased. And I cannot tell you the truth. I accept that totally. Because it's true. I don't deny who I am. But when you look at it, and the fact, I say go to the United Nations website and look. Who is condemned and who is not condemned? Do you know that Syria has killed more Arabs in 1 month than Israel in all these years that they have been fighting? Who has condemned Syria? Israel.
Nobody.
Israel is condemned. Iran and Iraq, they kill among each other. They have even Syria, they have the weapons of mass destruction. They have gas weapons, you know, and only we are going to destroy. If you give us, we are going to destroy. We don't condemn you. if there was a Jew already, he will be in the hay, and we condemned for eternity by the world. These people who are mass criminals, not even their name comes out to be condemned by the world justice. From its origin, I seek a rock like it, and from the hills I see, and behold, it is a nation that will dwell in solitude and not be reckoned among the nations. When Israel has dwelt in solitude, no ever. Not even in the best time when we had a monarchy, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. Israel was fortified and needed to be on call all the time. But it's coming the day of restoration, the Tikkun Olam, the restoration of the world. And that's where Mashiach is going to come to finish the job. That's the reason that we have this hope here against those villains that keep coming, trying to destroy Israel, but they cannot destroy Israel because Israel is only punished by God. Do you remember I started telling you about the difference between a bracha and a hilul, a curse, a blessing and a curse? And when God bless you, nobody can touch you, only if He allows that. Now, what is the way to destroy Israel? There is no way. You know, and the scripture said, do you want to destroy Israel? The sun and the heavens and the earth, every need to pass away. And only that, Israel will be destroyed. Israel cannot be destroyed, but Israel can be punished. And how God will punish Israel? Through other nations too. We have seen the history of Israel, how we have been punished because we have been disobedient to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we need to be alert. Instead to say, to be holier than thou. We need to see many things that we are failing as the people. Because you see, I repeat again, Israel is not a race. Israel is a people that have been called by their name, by God. And Israel comprises all the nations of the world inside Israel. And they have a calling. But every time that they leave that calling, they suffer the consequences. And one of the ways that Bilam very smartly devised, look at, we'll continue. Verse 10. Who has counted the dust of Jacob, or numbered the quarters of Israel? May my soul die the death of their right, and may my end be like his. Balak said to Bilam, what have you done to me? To curse my enemy has I brought you, but behold, you have even blessed. And he spoke and said, it is not so that whatever the Lord puts in my mouth, that I might take heed to speak? And Balak said to him, go now with me to a different place from which you will see them. Whoever you will see is aged, but I not see all of it. And you will curse for me from there. He took him to the field of the lookouts, to the summit of the heights, and he built 7 altars, and brought out a bull and a ram on each altar. And he said to Balak, stand here by your burnt offering, and I will be happening upon here. The Lord happened upon Balaam and put an utterance in his mouth and said, go back to Balak and say this. He came to him, and behold, he was standing by his burnt offerings, and the officers of Moab were with him. And Balak said to him, what did the Lord speak? And he declaimed this parable and said, stand erect, O Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is no a man. Oh, that's so important. God is no a man. He should be deceitful, nor a son of man, that he should relent. No a son of man. Oh, it's so clear. To relent. Will he say and not do, or speak and not confirm? Behold, to bless has I received. He has blessed, and I shall not contradict it. He perceived no iniquity in Jacob, and saw no perversity in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the friendship of the king is with him. It is God who brought them out of Egypt according to the power of his loveliness. For there is no divination in Jacob, and no sorcery in Israel. Even now it is said to Jacob and Israel, what God has wrought. Behold, the people will arise like a lion cub, and rise himself like a lion, and will not lie down until he consumes the prey and drink the blood of the slain. Balak said to Balaam, neither shall you curse them all, nor shall you bless them at all. And Balaam answered and said to Balak, have I not spoken to you, saying, whatever the Lord shall speak, that I shall do? And Balak said to Balaam, go now, and shall take you a different place. Perhaps I will be proper to God's eyes, that you will curse them from me from here. And Balak took Balaam to the summit of the height, and overlooked the face of the wasteland. And Balaam said to Balak, build me for me here 7 altars, and prepare 7 bulls. Balak did as Balaam said, and brought it at the bull and a ram on each altar. And you're going to see the continue this strategy. Why this simple question to all of you? Why Balaam once for all say, I cannot do it? Why he tried over and over and over again? Finally he said, God cannot punish or bless or take the blessing upon the people that he gave it, only if the people do something wrong. Then what was the strategy of Balaam against Israel? You see in the next continuation. You see the case of that we're going to see in the next week. We're going to talk a little bit more. Is about Zimri and Kosti, the Shimonite chief, and Cosby, the Midianite prince. And you're going to see here how Israel is punished. Not destroyed, but punished. Because they decided to tempt Israel. Sorry that they blame the women for doing that, but I was not the women. Sorry to tell you, but this is another thing that we need to be clear. I am keep telling people about this over and over again. It's very easy to blame somebody else. The woman made me do it. The woman picked the little finger and brought me. I am the man, and I have the responsibility. You cannot do something and then blame somebody else for you doing it. When I was tempted by the devil, how many of us we have used that excuse? I was on my own. I was a little disturbed. How many of us keep giving excuses for our own misdeeds until we don't come clear, until we do come right, until we do not accept. You know, I am glad that there is no one who doesn't sin. That's what the scripture said. You know, there's no one. Then we need to be careful to look for excuses, and we need to come back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But God will never abandon Israel. And if God doesn't abandon Israel, He will never abandon you, because you are one of His chosen. You have His covering upon you. And this is the reality of today. When God is with you, who can be against you? That's Rabbi Shaul who spoke about that. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may the Lord give you a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.